Why do we play video games? Well, I imagine we all have our different reasons, but most could agree it's to have fun and to gain some form of completion in the process. Whether that be getting a higher score or fastest lap, finishing and completing a game, and even saving the princess or the whole world. This describes just about every game ever made except for one, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. But why is this game so different from every other game ever made? Well, there is no win in it, and you've lost before you've even started playing. Yes, you've heard me correctly, this is a game you cannot win, and as Hicks from Aliens would say, game over man, game over! Just the idea alone of an unwinnable game makes this one of the most unique games ever made, and is so deserving of a scary review. So, for this year's Halloween special, I'll be reviewing I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. In the future, a Cold War has turned into a Third World War, and 3 supercomputers, each made by China, Russia and the United States, have been made to better manage a war that would be too complicated for mankind. But one of these supercomputers has become self-aware and has taken over the other 2 supercomputers of the world. With all 3 of the world's supercomputers under AM's control, AM, I think, so therefore I am, AM in one fell swoop judges humanity and launches a nuclear attack that kills the whole human race except for 5 people who seemingly at random have been spared by AM. He has saved and immortalised these 5 people so that he can torture them for his own amusement. Over 109 years later, these 5 souls have been through every kind of torture you could imagine, and by this point they're almost nothing but empty husks. But the human spirit is nothing if not resilient, and it's this never-ending quality that AM feeds on. If these people completely broke down, then AM's fun would end. The reason AM makes these human lives a living hell is because he hates humanity, and also because he himself is a prisoner trapped in his very own mind. He has this vast intellect, but can't do anything with it other than making the lives of the last few humans alive a living hell. So in order for AM to entertain himself, he has devised a new game for these humans to play. He is forcing them to go on a quest to face their own fatal flaws. These flaws have ruined each of these 5 people's lives, and maybe that was the reason they were saved in the first place. AM has no doubt that each of these people will fail. In fact, he wants them to fail so he can take great enjoyment from it. There is no win in this game, but there is, however, more victories to be had, where your characters can meet their ends as decent human beings, and in the process find some kind of redemption, well proven to AM that people can change. But that's enough about the story, let's move on to the gameplay. There is not a lot to say about the gameplay here. This game is a point-and-click adventure game, and sits in that awkward period between text-based adventure games and the modern point-and-click adventure game. Remember in my Space Quest review I said that game wasn't flawed, but time had just passed it by. Well, the same can't be said for I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Adventure games started out as text-based, and later evolved into point-and-click adventure games. In these early point-and-click games, you have to click on commands to interact with the worlds. So if you want to push something, you had to first click on the push commands, and then with that command selected, you'd click on the part of the screen you wanted to push. When you considered that in modern point-and-click adventure games, you only have 2 ways to interact. Left mouse button is used to interact, talk and combine items, and the right mouse button is used to examine things to gain further insights to help you solve puzzles. The problem with I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream's older point-and-click interface is it's tedious, and clicking on all them commands just feels clunky when compared to the intuitive interface of modern point-and-click adventure games. This game is in no way flawed, but just a product of its time, but because this game's user interface is so close to that of the modern point-and-click adventure game, it can make this game a little frustrating as it's so close but yet so far away from what modern point-and-click adventure gamers are used to. But despite this game's archaic user interface, I still enjoyed playing it very much, but I did have a further 2 issues with this game. The first was pixel hunting. Yes, this is a common problem with some point-and-click adventure games, so this game is no exception to it. And the second was puzzles. I don't mind a good puzzle, but you have to be able to solve them with observation and some common sense. While playing this game, I had my keyboard in one hand and my tablet in the other, with a guide to this game open on it. I don't like using guides with point-and-click adventure games unless I have to, but the puzzles in this game were just too hard that I had no choice. And even when I did use a guide, they weren't all that helpful, as most of the guides I could find online were just badly written and didn't fully explain what you need to do. So if anyone out there writes game walkthroughs and is looking for a new challenge, then I would suggest this game as it needs a better, more in-depth guide. On a more positive note, the graphics to this game are excellent. The backgrounds are super detailed and exciting to look at. Each of the 5 characters' quests are visually very different from each other, and this game does a superb job of making you believe they're in these very different places that AM has created. But the character animations are lacking. I wouldn't have minded little to no character animation, but the way these characters are badly animated reminds you that you're playing a game, and that takes you out of the experience. I know this may seem like a negative review because I've criticised most aspects of this game, but I really do like it. All the problems I've mentioned with the gameplay are issues that plague most point-and-click games of this time period, so don't think too harsh on this game for being on par gameplay-wise with the average point-and-click game of the early to mid-90s. What really makes or breaks these games is the stories, and this game has one of the most original stories of this genre. Now all that's left to talk about is this game's history and eventual digital re-release. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream started out life as a short story written by Harlan Ellison. The short 7-page story was written in one night, and not much changed from the first draft. This is one of the most popular short stories ever written, and one of the 10 most reprinted stories in the English language. Harlan Ellison is a prolific speculative fiction writer with a career spanning over 50 years. He has written many novels and short stories, and has even written for classic TV shows like The Twilight Zone, the original Star Trek series, and one of my all-time favourite TV shows, Babylon 5. Over the years, Harlan was approached many times to adapt his short story into another medium. Eventually, Cyber Dreams was able to persuade Harlan to let them adapt his short story into a video game. Harlan expanded his short story and also wrote a script that the Dreamers Guild would then turn into a video game. Right from the beginning, Harlan made it clear that this wasn't a game you could win in any conventional sense, but instead focusing on moral victories. The theme in this game wasn't just philosophical, but it also seeped into the gameplay as well. So you better keep regular saves, because if you make a mistake you won't be able to progress further in this game, or if one of your characters fails their quest, then you'll be seeing Am again very soon.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 3.
Surprisingly, the voice of Am was voiced by none other than Harlan himself. When he wrote the narration of Am in the book, it was written in his voice, so who better to bring to life Am than the creator himself? I love Harlan's voice of Am and how he's tearing you apart one minute and then butting you up while thinking about the next torture he's going to inflict on you. When this game was first released, it was unwinnable. Not that you could really win the game anyway. The reason why this game couldn't be finished was because the game was censored, and one of the quests was removed. Now, Nimdok was a scientist who experimented on people, and his quest played out in a World War II prison camp. As Harlan always says, no one should forget the Holocaust. But the publisher must have felt this quest was too much for people or was inappropriate. Whatever the reason, this quest was removed, and without playing this and the other 4 characters' quests, it was not possible to play the final act to finish this game. There was a patch released to fix this, and an uncensored version of this game was released that did let you play Nimdor's quest. There was plans at one point for a console port, but that never happened. It's a shame this port was cancelled because a console version would have been a great way to expand the audience for this game, and like myself, many point-and-click adventure gamers first got this taste for this genre on the original PlayStation. Despite this game being a modest hit on PC, it eventually became abandonware because the original developer and publisher had both gone under by the late 90s. Because the rights were lost, there was never a re-release of this game for a growing audience of gamers who would just find out about this obscure classic but had no legal way to play it. All that changed when Night Drive Studios recovered the rights and finally released this game on GOG. When it's not on sale, the game can be bought for a steal at $5.99, and that also includes the awesome soundtrack as well. So, my final thoughts. Gaming, like any other art form, is capable of pushing the boundaries and making you reconsider what a game can be. I'm just surprised the idea you've really lost a game before you even started playing it has never been explored again, and that makes I Have No Mouth, and I Must Scream, one of the most unique games ever made, and I highly recommend this game to hardcore point-and-click adventure gamers, and gamers that love something very left of field, and so I give this game a spooky thumb approval. Thank you for watching, and have a happy and safe Halloween, and before I leave you to enjoy your candy and scary movies, I have one last question for you. If you must scream, but you have no mouth to do so, then how would you scream?